It was a cold winter night in Hull, and 21-year-old Libby Squire had just disappeared into the darkness. No one knew it then, but the security cameras had already recorded the final pieces of a scary puzzle, one that would shock an entire country. Hull, East Yorkshire is a nice college town in England, home to around 14,000 students. Among them was 21-year-old Libby Squire, who everyone lovingly called Libby. She was in her second year studying philosophy at the University of Hull and had really grown during her time there. Friends said she was funny, talented, and full of life. A young woman who always made sure no one felt left out. She had a close group of friends, a loving family, and a boyfriend, Connor, whom she had been with for 3 years. To those who knew her, Libby was the kind of person who brightened every room she walked into. But behind that bright smile was a young woman who had fought hard battles. Libby had struggled with an eating problem, hurting herself, and the heavy pressure she put on herself to do well. Her family said she expected too much from herself, and though her mental health had been difficult, she had worked hard to earn her place at college. She took a gap year to travel to Paris and came back full of energy, ready to take on the world. Her relationship with Connor was strong. He called her the most interesting person he had ever met and said he knew even at his young age that she was the one. Libby had big dreams. She talked about becoming a journalist after college and wanted to travel the world with her housemates. College life had helped her become a more confident, lively version of herself. On the night of January 31st, 2019, Libby left her student home on Wellesley Avenue at around 8:30 p.m. She and her friends were going to a nearby house to drink, play games, and hang out before going out to town. It was a normal student night out, and they planned to end the evening at a local nightclub called the Welly. At around 10 p.m., Libby texted Connor goodnight, saying she was leaving her phone at home. At 11:20 p.m., security camera footage showed Libby and her friends arriving at the Welly, but she was not allowed inside. Clearly drunk, she had trouble walking or even standing. The club's security workers told her she'd had too much to drink. Worried about her safety, her friends called a taxi, gave the driver some cash, and asked him to take her home. They watched the cab drive off, thinking she'd be safe. But Libby never made it home. Around 3 a.m., her friends, now coming back from the night out, began to worry. They texted a housemate who had stayed home asking if Libby was back. The answer scared them. She hadn't come back. Her phone was still at home, and they found her keys thrown in the garden. It was freezing outside, snow had begun to fall, and Libby had been very drunk when they last saw her. Scared, they called the police right away. Police treated her disappearance seriously from the start. There was some wondering. Had Libby's mental health gotten worse again? Had she walked off on her own? But her loved ones said no. Libby had been in great spirits, was doing well in school, and had so much to look forward to. Police began looking at security cameras around Wellesley Avenue. The taxi driver said he had dropped her off near her home and that he saw her walking toward her front door, but for some reason, she never went inside. At 11:37 p.m., cameras showed Libby walking around nearby streets. At 11:40 p.m., 2 people walking by noticed her lying in the snow. She was crying and seemed upset. They tried to help, but she became snappy and confused, refusing help. Moments later, another group of students saw her and invited her in, worried about her. Libby said no and kept walking, seeming confused. Experts later said she may have been in the early stages of hypothermia, which can cause confusion and strange behavior. Meanwhile, her disappearance had quickly grown into one of the biggest missing persons cases in Humberside police history. The community came together. Students, local people, and Coast Guards all joined in the search. Police searched local rivers, looked through neighborhoods, and checked empty buildings. Social media filled up with Libby's photo, and her name was in all the headlines. Her parents made tearful public requests, begging for any information. The image of Libby, cold, vulnerable, and alone, haunted everyone involved. And somewhere, buried in hours of grainy security camera footage, was a scary truth waiting to be found. As the hours turned to days, the search for Libby Squire got stronger. Her disappearance had now gripped not just the city of Hull, but the entire country. Police continued to look through security camera footage, knocking door to door, asking people to check sheds, outbuildings, and trash cans. Volunteers and college students helped search the snowy streets and nearby fields. Helicopters flew overhead and water units searched the river hull. Yet, despite the huge efforts, there were still no solid leads. But everything changed when a local person came forward with a scary tip. The man who lived near the Oak Road playing field said he heard a woman screaming around 12:15 a.m. on the night Libby disappeared. It had been loud enough to wake him, and he remembered the time exactly because he had checked his phone. When he looked out the window, he saw a man walking quickly toward a parked car. This tip gave police a better time frame and a specific place to look more carefully. Detectives went back to the security camera footage with new focus. If Libby had been seen walking near her home at 11:40 p.m. and the scream was heard at 12:15 a.m., that left a window of about 30 to 40 minutes. Then they spotted something. A silver Vauxhall Astra driving around the area multiple times, seeming to have no purpose. Just before midnight, the car pulled into a street near where Libby had been walking. The driver got out, crossed the road, and seemed to talk with her. Libby, who had been walking without direction, now seemed to stop near a bus stop. The man crossed back over the street and came up to her. They spoke briefly, and within minutes, she was seen getting into the car. The car then drove off into the night. Her wristwatch was later found in that area, making investigators think there may have been a fight. Using the car's movements, they tracked the silver Astra to the Oak Road playing fields, the same area where the scream had been heard. The car stayed there for about 10 minutes. Then its headlights turned on, and it pulled away. Moments later, around 3 a.m., two women in another part of the city had a scary encounter. A man stepped out in front of them and began exposing himself and touching himself in the open. He seemed to enjoy their discomfort, showing no shame or fear. The women reported what happened, and thanks to their detailed description and the matching car, police were able to identify the suspect, 24-year-old Powell Reloix. On February 6, 2019, just 1 week after Libby disappeared, police made an arrest. Crime scene teams rushed to a modest home in Hull. The man living there, Powell Reloix, was a married father of two who worked as a butcher. To his neighbors, he was friendly, quiet, always seen walking with his wife and children. No one could have imagined what secrets he was hiding. Police took his car and started a detailed crime scene examination. Meanwhile, they started looking into Reloix's past. What they found was deeply disturbing. Powell had no criminal record, which explained why his name hadn't come up in earlier investigations. But now that they had his DNA and fingerprints, everything began falling into place. He was connected to a bunch of unsolved sex crimes that had troubled Hull over the previous 2 years. Reloix had been stalking women at night, looking through windows, breaking into homes, and stealing underwear. In some cases, he left used condoms behind as a disturbing signature. One woman even woke up to find him staring at her through her bedroom door's glass. Another said she saw him run away after she alerted her housemates. Police had collected DNA at several of these scenes, but without a match, they had stayed unsolved. Now they had their man. Investigators learned that Reloix often told his wife he was going for evening runs, but instead he would walk around Hull streets looking for women. Sometimes to follow, sometimes to watch, and sometimes to confront. He admitted to police that he had a strong addiction to violent and hardcore pornography, and said he had trouble controlling his urges. Reloix lived just minutes from where Libby had last been seen. Despite his denial of any involvement in her disappearance, the security camera footage showed her getting into his car. When shown the footage, he changed his story. He claimed he had picked Libby up that night out of kindness, saying she looked cold and confused. He told police he drove her to the Oak Road fields, let her out, and then left. According to him, he went straight home, took a bath, and watched pornography on his phone. But detectives weren't believing it. His car had been seen returning to the scene just 2 hours later. His pattern was clear. He had a dark, obsessive history of predatory behavior. And now, Libby Squire was missing. Police charged him with multiple sexual crimes dating back to 2017. But even with the evidence piling up, they still didn't have enough to charge him with Libby's disappearance. 7 days had now passed since Libby Squire vanished. Police made their search stronger, focusing not just on public spaces, but on the private world of Powell Reloix. They did a thorough investigation of his home, but it was his car that told a far more disturbing story. Inside the car, investigators found a collection of horrifying evidence. Women's underwear, sex toys, photographs of women taken without their knowledge, and other stolen personal items. Most damning were the used condoms and DNA traces that connected him to a series of previously unsolved sex crimes around Hull. Still, when asked about Libby, Reloix denied any wrongdoing, sticking to his story that he was simply trying to help a distressed young woman. But police weren't convinced. Security footage showed him returning to Oak Road playing fields at around 2:30 a.m., 2 hours after he'd supposedly dropped Libby off there. He stayed for a few minutes before driving back into the city, where he exposed himself to 2 women on the street. Investigators believe this late-night return to the scene was his attempt to hide evidence or throw away incriminating items. But there was still one question that haunted everyone. Where was she? That question was tragically answered on March 20th, 2019, nearly 7 weeks after Libby had vanished. A fisherman in the Humber estuary discovered a badly decomposed body floating in the water. Around the neck was a necklace with a single letter L. Police confirmed what everyone had dreaded. The body was Libby Squire. Due to the advanced decomposition, a clear cause of death could not be determined. Pathologists said she could have died from drowning or suffocation, but the condition of her remains made it impossible to say for sure. However, it was confirmed that she had been raped before she died. That alone was enough to escalate the case from a missing person investigation to a full murder inquiry. Her body was believed to have entered the water from the River Hull near the fields where she had last been seen. Police thought she had been pushed or placed into the river behind Oak Road playing fields, and then floated downstream into the estuary. Libby had always been terrified of water and wasn't a strong swimmer, a detail that devastated her mother, Lisa, who later said it made her imagine the terror Libby must have felt in her final moments. Lisa took to Facebook, writing a heartbreaking message. "I cannot thank you enough, my darling pie, for making me a mummy, for choosing me to be your mummy. I kept you safe for as long as I could, and I am so sorry I could not keep you safe on that night. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." As news of Libby's death broke, the nation mourned. Vigils were held, flowers and notes left outside the university, and tributes poured in across social media. But behind the public grief, detectives continued to build their case against the man they now knew was responsible. In August 2019, Reloix finally appeared in court. At first, he denied all charges, but just before the trial began, he changed his plea, admitting guilt to 9 charges. 4 counts of voyeurism, 2 of outraging public decency, and 3 counts of burglary, all committed between 2017 and 2019. He was sentenced to 8.5 years in prison, later reduced to just under 6 after a successful appeal. It was a bitter pill to swallow for many, but it gave police time to gather everything they needed to link him to Libby's final hours. They continued searching through thousands of hours of security camera footage. Finally, they had it. Clear footage showing him returning to the Oak Road fields just 2 hours after he had taken Libby there. The timing made no sense unless he was going back to hide something. The evidence was now overwhelming. Police and prosecutors believed it was time. In October 2019, Libby's funeral was held with nearly 300 people attending. Just 2 weeks later, the police made the announcement the public had waited for. After reviewing all the evidence and talking with the Crown Prosecution Service, Powell Reloix was officially charged with the rape and murder of Libby Squire. When the charges were read to him through a translator, Reloix reportedly laughed. His own mother remained in disbelief, insisting her son was innocent and had always respected women. But even she said that if he was guilty, he should be punished to the fullest extent of the law. The wheels of justice were finally turning. As Powell Reloix awaited trial for the rape and murder of Libby Squire, the nation held its breath. Due to delays caused by the pandemic, the trial wouldn't begin until January 2021, nearly 2 years after Libby's death. In that time, Libby's family tried to live with the unthinkable. Her mother, Lisa, continued to show unwavering strength, campaigning for stronger laws around non-consensual sex offenses and pushing for harsher punishments for those who prey on women. When the trial finally began at Sheffield Crown Court, the prosecution laid out a damning case. They painted a portrait of Powell Reloix as a dangerous predator whose sexual compulsions had gotten worse until they resulted in the worst possible crime. He was a man, they said, who prowled the streets of Hull in search of vulnerable women. He had spent years watching, following, and violating boundaries, breaking into homes, stealing intimate items, and exposing himself in public. On the night of January 31st, 2019, prosecutors said Reloix found the perfect target. Libby, alone, drunk, confused, and vulnerable, was exactly the kind of woman he was seeking. Security cameras showed him circling the area multiple times before approaching her. After a brief exchange, she got into his car. The prosecution argued that once Libby was inside, her fate was sealed. They pointed out that even though the car was only at the Oak Road fields for less than 10 minutes, it was more than enough time. Libby, unsteady on her feet and likely suffering from hypothermia, would have been unable to resist. The pathologist had already confirmed signs of sexual assault. His DNA was found on and inside her body, and importantly, he had returned to the scene 2 hours later. A visit the prosecution said could only be explained by an effort to hide or destroy evidence. Reloix stuck to his story. He claimed that the encounter was consensual, that Libby had started it, and he had simply left her in the fields afterward, but no one was convinced. The jury thought about it for 5 days. On February 11, 2021, the verdict came in, guilty of both rape and murder. The jury found him guilty by an 11-1 majority. Reloix was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 27 years. Upon sentencing him, the judge stated plainly that Libby had never stood a chance that night. He said Reloix may never be released, and if he ever is, he would be monitored for the rest of his life. Outside the courtroom, Lisa and Russell Squire gave a brief statement. Today's verdict changes nothing for us. They said there is no closure. We don't get to have Libby back. Our lives don't go back to normal. But we are pleased that all the hard work and dedication of the police and legal teams has been recognized. Libby will always be with us. We are all so proud of our beautiful, caring, wonderful girl. After his conviction, Reloix's wife separated from him and returned to Poland with their children. She insisted that she had never known that side of him, that the man she married was kind and gentle. She was horrified by what had been revealed in court. Lisa Squire didn't stop fighting. She joined forces with Humber Police to campaign for better reporting and recognition of low-level sex crimes, acts that while not violent in nature often get worse. She argued that had Reloix been caught and charged earlier for his voyeurism, indecent exposure, and burglaries, Libby might still be alive. Lisa also met with then Prime Minister Boris Johnson, urging him to introduce automatic life sentences for anyone convicted of murder. When Johnson said there weren't enough prison spaces, Lisa responded plainly, then build more. It's as simple as that. In 2022, Lisa revealed she had asked to meet with Reloix in prison. He had initially agreed.